again, everybody, and welcome to episode 20, the Al Secord edition of Angles and Attitudes. He's John, I'm Mark. Today, we're joined by former Blackhawk and Hartford Whaler and current Chicago Wolves analyst, Biily Gardner. Billy, thanks for joining us and welcome to Angles and Attitudes.
Hey, Billy.
Hello, John. It's thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure. I always love to talk about the game. It's been my livelihood and my life since I was about 4 or 5 years old.
There you go. Hey, so we're going to start with a humble brag. You were the MVP on a team that had somebody by the name of Wayne Gretzky on it. So we're going to let you start right from there and take us through it from there.
I won't say a word, but I brought this on purpose. And now this is not rehearsed, is it?
No.
I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes.
That's his last game at the United Center when I was broadcasting for the Hawks. And he says, to Billy, your friend Wayne Gretzky, New York Rangers, 1999. But on the back, and I'll tell the story, on the back he wrote this, which I didn't know at first, but he writes, I wanted you to know that I tell my good friends and family as a compliment that you were the best junior hockey player I ever saw, Wayne.
Wow.
Now, what happened was that picture, obviously it's his last game. I think he had about 4 more to go and he was retiring, and he's at the United Center, and there was probably 100 people waiting outside the morning skate by the dressing rooms. And a friend of mine that was helping out the New York Rangers at the time in their dressing room came out and said, Wayne says he's going to be at the bus. I'm thinking, how is he going to get through all this to get to the bus without, anybody seeing him? But he did. And lo and behold, I went out to the bus. He comes off the bus and we were just chit-chatting. Now the bus driver himself comes out and says, I'd like to take a picture. So I move away and he says, no, Bill, go ahead. I want you in there too. So he takes that picture that you see. So at that night before the game, he brings in a manila envelope and hands it to me and says, this is a picture. I said, of what? He says, of you, Wayne. And I said, wow, that's great. So I open it up and it's got the friend. He just turn it over. I turned it over and I go, oh my God, that is unbelievable. So of course it's double-sided. I've had it beside my bed ever since. I still am in contact with him quite a bit, through his father's passing this January and his birthday. He turned 60 in January also. And I'm able to keep in touch with him here and there. But to me, for him to say that, gosh, it was pretty cool. But Pat Foley, the likes of him, and all the guys I've talked to, or we've discussed it on games, have always said, what happened with you? Wayne says this, what happened?
I know.
Timing.
You were a great player. I loved you.
Thanks, John.
That's the guy that hits 3 home runs in his first 3 ABs in the major leagues. And from there, it's all downhill, man. It's tough to do it from there. So,
yeah. Hey, but we were only 15 and 16 on that junior B team. We were playing against 20-year-olds. In fact, our goaltender was 21 and had a baby. So it was kind of cool. But we were pretty good. It was fun.
Hey, John, before you jump in, I'll bolt right onto that. Are you going to give the great one tips now that he's going to become a broadcaster? Is he going to be on TNT? You're going to take him under your wing or what?
Well, I don't think he's going to be Charles Barkley. That's one thing. Wayne is so mild-mannered, and I don't know if he's ever put down anybody in his life with words. So it'll be interesting to see. I know he's not doing a lot, but his name just gives some presence to what's happening in hockey on television.
No doubt about it. John, I'll serve it to you.
Billy, I know you came up in 80-81 for the Hawks for basically the cup of coffee, but then 81-82 is that first season here in Chicago. And of course, you go from the great one to Mr. Savoir-Faire years with Savard and the horrible Tessier years and everything. What was that feeling coming to Chicago? Number 14, as I remember, and just, take us back a little bit.
Yeah, quite honestly, I don't care. They've won Stanley Cups, and they've had some great teams in the last decade. But I think that era of the 80s in the stadium was the best hockey of all time. The fans just loved it. We were guys that made good money, but we were just kind of humble. I don't even know, white collar, blue collar, just guys that wanted to play the game and have fun with the fans. It's totally different today. There's no doubt about it. But being able to play with some of those great players, the Dougie Wilsons, and Tony, I sat beside Tony Esposito for 4 years, who was my idol. I love Tony. I played street hockey. I was always a goalie. So it was so cool to go through that time, walk those stairs to the ice surface, the rumbling of the stadium. There was nothing, nowhere like it whatsoever. So very fortunate in that way. Obviously, today I'd like to be playing and making millions, but that's the way it was.
You know, it was a great time because I'll never forget a first round playoff opener that you guys had against St. Louis. It was Esposito's birthday, his 40th birthday. And I'll never forget, you guys won game 6, 1-0. And
Right.
I can't show you what you did to a St. Louis Blues defenseman after the game. His name was Ed Kia.
Right.
And I'll never forget it. Espo shuts him out on the 40th birthday. And later on that night, when you talk about the camaraderie, I was out with a few friends. I wind up going down to a bar called PS Chicago downtown.
Sure.
And there you are with Savvy, Dave Hutchinson, and all those guys. And it was bedlam in the Garden, just like you said. A great time in Chicago.
Yeah, no, that was fun back in those times. Getting down after a game to Rush Street and seeing the fans and having a blast. But I do remember that game too because I actually have a photo of the line with the big scoreboard with the 1-0. So I do have that in color, so it's pretty cool to have.
What a night.
Yeah, it was fun.
Interesting. Those teams, we were the guys paying $4 to be able to sit in a second balcony
Sure.
and have our feet stick to the floor and just enjoy the heck out of it and be able to sprint upstairs and the same way you guys came up the stairs, we'd run up all those stairs to get to the second balcony to enjoy that. But it was interesting because I was looking at one of the rosters and you guys raised all the executives in the NHL now. You had Bob Murray, Doug Wilson, Daryl Sutter's back coaching, Kurt Frazier, Bruce Cassidy. All these guys are now guys in management, playing big parts in the development and the run in the National Hockey League.
Right. It's funny you said that because I've looked obviously too at my teammates through those 80s. And if you look at the Hartford Whalers, it's actually overwhelming what they have brought to the table for the National League, including a Joel Quenneville, who has been a spectacular coach for so many years. And I think a very poor move on the Hawks' part getting rid of him. But if you go through that list of the 86, 87 Hartford Whalers, it is phenomenal. The number of guys that are still in the game, whether it's in the coaching capacity, TV, Ray Ferraro does great work in Canada, or Ronnie Francis now with the Kraken in Seattle. I mean, there's just so many guys. Dean Evason's the coach of the Minnesota Wild. I mean, it goes on and on. As you said, the Hawks also. So something must have been going right in that
in the water there.
Yeah, the water's good.
I think it was the beer, not the water.
Well, there's water in beer, so you could kind of make that argument. Or you said that Ronnie Francis is with the Kraken, and if you listen to Don Cherry's podcast, they're the Kraken, whatever the heck Kraken is. But if you listen to Grapes, it's the Seattle Kraken that are taking over in the NHL there now. So.
It's a different name, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. He's got them all. Then there's nothing like
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, John.
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to you.
Billy, real quick, I want to ask you, those years in Chicago, going back from that 81, 82 season on, I know you were talking about, those were great years, great players. Matter of fact, I had a conversation with Murray Bannerman earlier in the week. And he was talking about those years, how close you guys came and everything else. Was there a particular line that because I think you did a lot of penalty kills too. I mean,
sure. Yeah,
but was there a particular line that you liked? I mean, I know there was the Ruskowski, Mulvey, and Preston line.
Yeah.
What was your favorite combinations when you were playing center? Because, going back to the Gretzky thing, I saw that you started out as a defenseman, so to go to a center,
I played defense all the way to junior. So my life as a 5-year-old all the way through to 17, I was a defenseman. I was, and I don't want to compare, but I was the Paul Coffey. And that, in fact, when I played with Wayne, I was a defenseman. And, Mark, you mentioned I was the MVP, which I'm going to pat myself on the back, but I had 102 points that year in junior B and on that team, but I was a defenseman. And then when I went to junior, Gary Green, who ended up being, we won the Memorial Cup. So, you know what that is, emblematic of Canadian Championship the second year. The next year, he ended up coaching the Washington Capitals, I think at the age of 25, 26. He was the youngest coach and still is ever in the NHL. But he brought me in and he said, you know, I think you're really talented. You can play and I think you have a future, but I really think you're too small to play defense with the way the game is. So I said, what do you want to do? And he put me on left wing for about 5 games and I was like no freedom whatsoever. As I said, I was a skater. I was like Paul Coffey. I was all over the map, but I'm going up and down, stops and starts. Not very much fun. So he moved me to center. And from then on, I pretty much stayed at center. Although having said that, I played, you know, my best probably with Dennis Savard and Steve Larmer when we had Daryl Sutter, Kurt Fraser, and Al Secord out for a lengthy period of time. And Orville did not like me. He liked his guys, and he liked his guys that he won with in the American Hockey League. And I'd already been with the Hawks a year prior. So I was the last guy he tried on that line, and it worked out. I ended up with 27 goals and really had a good year. And at the end of the year, before the playoffs started, those guys were coming back. And of course, they were great players. But he said to me, sorry, Bill, you're not going to be able to play. I've been told that those guys have to go back in their spot. So he was nice. He came up and was emphatic about thanking me that, you know, I worked so hard and had a very good year. So that was a blast. I mean, how can you not be successful playing with those two guys? Steve Larmer should be in the Hall of Fame, obviously.
Without question.
You know, and they're two just genuine, great individuals and players. So, you know, that was my favorite line. There's no doubt about it throughout my career with the Hawks. But it was different. My last year was with Mike Keenan. Mike Keenan was my coach my last year junior in Peterborough. And Mike, as soon as I got called up because I was down in the minors, he come up, he put me on the point in the power play because that's where I played my 3 years at junior, even though I was a forward. Because he knew of you know what I had played and how I had played my career, so that was kind of cool having that happen.
Were there a lot of differences between Mount Orville Tessier and Mike Keenan?
I could go through a lot of things. I wasn't, you know, we had some great coaches. I'll say this: Roger Nielsen was with Orville, and I think without Roger, it would have been a different story. Roger was so genuine and he was so smart at the game. You know, Orville was a motivator. He wasn't much of a coach in my eyes. You know, there's guys that did like him and stuff. And so I'm with Mike Keenan. I think Mike was a great coach. He pushed you to the limit. And if you couldn't handle it, you were gone. And that's just the way it was. And that's what you want. I mean, it's a sport, but you're trying to win. This is, you know, it's not like playing kids stuff. You're playing for, you know, your livelihood. This is money in your pocket. And that was what Mike was all about. He treated the guys really well off the ice. People don't know that. He was the first to bring in the credit card and have guys on the Hawks go to places. He brought in charter. The Blackhawks were the last team to charter. What a joke. I mean, it was pathetic. Our travel was brutal. Yeah. We would play on the road on a Saturday night and play at home Sunday. I mean, you had to travel the next morning. It was commercial. It was terrible. Yeah.
There's some ugly secrets there.
Yeah, I mean, I loved being a Blackhawk as a kid. I was a Blackhawk fan. My bedroom was littered with Blackhawk paraphernalia. Wow. Seriously, head to toe. But after getting there and going through it, looking back, God, they were cheap. Geez, terrible. And they never went, you know, you mentioned about the Oilers in those 80s where we were right there, you know, and I might have been a guy who got traded, but they never pushed to get to the next level. And all they cared about was getting into the playoffs to make money. It was just terrible.
Yeah, and the price of the ticket went up. It was a 50% increase in the ticket prices for the playoffs, and you had to buy those playoff tickets about a month in advance. And if you didn't make the playoffs, they would try to encourage you. They'll keep the money and go, yeah, we'll put it on your bill for next year and we'll sit on your money. So
can you imagine back? Yeah, Mark, back then the percentages of interest were a lot greater too. I mean, you were talking about 8, 9, 10% compared to today where there's no percent, but
they were floating.
They were making a lot of money off it.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, now we understand why you got the MVP as a D man. You just never passed Gretzky to puck, so he didn't touch it, so he couldn't score. But the interesting part is how a lot of times I've watched, you know, going to junior camps and stuff with my kid or whatever, where you realize all the guys that want to play forwards, and you look in the back, and there's 4 defensemen to go through a junior camp to skate in a 40-minute game. And guys, as they got older, were like, wait a second, there's more ice time.
Right.
There's 6D and there's 27 forwards wanting to try out for this team. I'm going to go back and I'm going to play defense. Ray Bork talked about being able to play both sides and how
Sure.
he became a much better defenseman because he was a forward and had seen the game from both sides.
Well, I think, I mean, that was a big part of my career. I think that's the truth, that as a player, if you have the ability to play all positions, you really learn the game and learn what it takes to play that position, whether it is a left winger, which I never played, as I had mentioned. And it was tough going up and down and stops and starts, but that's a part of the game that I'd never been through and learned what it was all about. But you're right on the numbers, you know, right through junior B, we only had 4 defensemen. So gosh, if you're penalty killing power play and playing, you're playing, you know, 30, 35 minutes a game if you're good. And that's what I loved about it. You were never off the ice. And of course Wayne wasn't either. So it was pretty cool to be, you know, with him during that time. And I had one little story too. And Walter Gretzky was such a great man. And I have so many thoughts and memories of his talks because he was so dedicated to the game too. And we were in a little town called Belleville, in fact, where the Hull family was from, and junior B, and I think we were up like 3-1, and they pulled their goalie, and I knew Wayne had 2 goals, and I blocked a shot, and I went down the ice. I have an empty net breakaway, and I looked back, and I see Wayne there, and I waited for him, and I tapped it over and was shoot into the empty net. Walter comes out after the game. He says, "Wayne, that's how I want you to play, just like Billy."
That's beautiful stuff. That's just great
Billy,
stuff.
but the transition, were you nervous about the transition from going to defense to offense? Were you, when you, of course, at the NHL level, was it, you know, when they said, okay, now you're going to play center, is a nervous transition?
Well, I think you have to realize that there's a lot more to center than, you know, what I was doing as a defenseman and faceoffs. And I never took a faceoff really. And faceoffs are so important. You don't want to be running all over the ice trying to find the puck. If you can win a faceoff, you know, you have control. So that to me is such a key. And that was a big part, trying to understand. And you know, luckily, Stan Mikita early in my career helped me out in that area. You know, there's some great players that you could talk to that would give you their, you know, little pointers, et cetera. But it wasn't in some case, I would say that I was a little apprehensive, but it's funny you said that too, because I've had many a player that I grew up with through those junior B or junior A times have said to me, I think you would have been a better player still as a defenseman. Just let you play your game the way you played. And, you know, I think you would have been better overall, but you know, that's hindsight and we'll never know that. But I mean, I wasn't a very big guy and I wasn't very aggressive and I couldn't fight my way out of a wet paper bag. So, you know, against some of these guys today that are 6'3", 6'4", 240, there's no chance in front of the net.
Well, and you can't, what everybody says, you can't coach size. But did you find also then stamina wise, the game, you know, defenseman, you can kind of, I wouldn't say float into the play, but you can, you can gauge how hard you want to skate. And if you know it's icing, you're not going to chase and you're like, okay, I can get a blow here while the play is still going on. How long did it take for that element of the game to come back?
That's a great point too. And, you know, when you're in junior, and that's where I learned, you know, to play a little bit more of that position, you're on the ice a lot. If you're a half decent player, you're playing a lot more. So you have to be aware of that and be smart too. And a lot of guys will hog the ice and stay on even though they're exhausted. So really it's up to yourself to learn and understand that. But I think you're right. As a defenseman, you can sit back and wait and watch, and you don't have to go as hard all the time. So that is again, that's a part of the transition of playing different positions and learning.
There you go.
This great career that you had as, of course, the defenseman, the forward and everything, leads you into this announcing career.
Yeah.
Did you know after your playing days, Billy, that this is something you really wanted to do?
Well, a lot of people I know said you were an introvert. How did you ever get into this? And you're a quiet, shy guy. And it's funny because I look back probably, well, in fact, when I was the Hartford Whalers, I didn't dress Ronnie Francis. When I got traded to Hartford, Ronnie Francis had a broken foot. So, you know, I played kind of in his position, but Ronnie came back and then we had too many players. And the first series was against Quebec, and the Hartford Whalers made the playoffs. In fact, I was going to the Masters tournament to watch golf. And we won the last 2 games to slip into the playoffs. So it took away my Masters tickets. But it's kind of funny because at that point I'm skating and we're in Quebec. Quebec finished first, and it's a 3-5 series. And at the time it was Sports Channel New England, which is like Sports Channel Chicago, same kind of family. One of the bosses was there in Quebec with the team, and he said to me, would you go on TV with us and be that second color guy and just talk about. So I did, and I did a few games. In the very first game, do you remember Jimmy Mann? He was a Quebec Nordique, tough guy, really crazy guy. And I'll never forget, he got into a battle early in the game, and I said, that guy needs a dog leash. He's such a, whatever. And they loved it. And so it continued on that for the playoffs. And I got a taste of it with Rick Peckham, who did the Tampa Bay Lightning for a number of years. He's a spectacular play-by-play guy. But then I continued. I was playing in Europe, and I came back my last year, I believe it was. I was in Florida actually with my family, and Pat Foley called me and he said, listen, they're looking to do a pregame show for the Hawk games. Would you be interested? And I said, well, I'm in Florida. He says, well, you'd have to come up. I said, do I have to pay to come up myself? He said, yeah, you will. But I did it, and that's how I got my foot in the door. And I ended up going to Hartford after doing 3 years of the pregame show. I applied for the job in Hartford. Obviously, I had played there, so it was a bit of an in. And then moved to Carolina. And then the Hawks asked me to come back. So only for those 4 years. And I could tell you so many stories that would blow your mind how I had to leave there. But it was sad because I came back to where I wanted to be. And Pat's been a great friend over all those years too. And all of a sudden, after 4 years, I don't have a job. And obviously, Don Levin and the Wolves called me up that summer and asked, would you join us? And I said, absolutely. And this will be my 20th season with the Wolves.
Good on you.
Yeah.
So, but your playing career is actually, you look at all the play-by-play guys that you've carried, John Forsling, Pat Foley, look at you, made them Hall of Famers out of all of these guys. It's amazing, the Gretzky thing, and then you go in the booth and carry these guys. So,
the other guy, Judd Surratt,
in Boston, right? Yeah.
Boston. His name's been bantered about a little bit for the Hawks. Is Pat Foley, who's been pushed out, not leaving. He's been pushed out. That is 100% fact.
It smells bad.
Absolutely ridiculous. I wish reporters, it's such a bad city, politically correct, all that stuff that's going on today. But the reporters have no fight. They should be digging for stories. They don't anymore. And this Pat Foley thing is ridiculous. They're pushing them out. And Eddie's on the way out next.
Billy, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the second time Pat has been pushed out in their Blackhawk career.
When I got let go, they wanted to let go Pat too, believe it or not. Yeah. And his blessing was John McDonough coming into the picture because he was friendly with John and got to come back. So we won the Calder Cup in 2008, and the next year John came in and brought him back. Otherwise, he might not have ever come back. And it's a shame. He's so good.
He's the best.
Top 5, yeah. And
it's going to be difficult.
There's so many things I could talk about the Hawk. It just drives me nuts.
Well, that's okay. I mean, because we, for a couple of, whatever our wives call us, a couple of jamokes, we had Mark Giangreco on a couple of weeks ago, and then he jumped on and surprised Diane Burns from Channel 7. And the gloves came off, and Mark was just talking about the fact that it's just what you said. Everybody's afraid to say stuff. Nobody wants to tell the truth. And Mark basically, he's like, I don't want any part of it anymore. I'm good. I'm going to go be a grandpa. I've had enough. He spun a bunch of stories about being a hockey dad and all, but basically said the same thing. Is like, nobody wants to tell the truth anymore, and everybody's afraid. And even we had, again, Chip Carey was on the other day, and he was like, he goes, a guy goes 0 for 27, and if I say the guy went 0 for 27, I'm bashing him.
Right.
But if he goes 4 for 8, and I say he went 4 for 8, and his grandma in Oshkosh is having a great time watching him, he never comes and says, hey, man, thanks for the shout out on my grandmother and everything else.
Yeah.
Everybody's just afraid of the truth.
They want cheaper, and they want people that'll be puppets and say what they want them to say. That's what it's all about now. And that's a shame. Pat Foley taught me how to respect the game, but actually be a guy that could say what you felt. I mean, that's what you're paid for. Aren't you? You're an athlete that played the game. You're supposed to tell the game and see, and whatever you see, you talk about. It's such a shame that is the case But that's what they want, and it's ridiculous. I just can't believe people are going to enjoy having new guys come in instead of having Pat. That to me is ridiculous.
That's the part that I question.
You have seen the game change from so many different levels.
Right.
Go ahead.
But that's
You've
the thing.
seen the game change from so many different levels as a player and an announcer. So what you just brought up now is so true.
Yeah, it's a shame. It really is, because Harry Carey was my favorite too. And look what he did. I mean, he just said it as it was. And people didn't tune in to see the Cubs. People tuned in to listen to Harry, because he was such an icon.
But that's, Billy, you're right on the mark, because the disrespect factor, there's been some steaming dumpster fire of games over the past year and a half with the Blackhawks.
Sure.
That the only reason people stay around is because Eddie and Pat Foley tell stories and try to entertain, knowing what's happening on the ice is just is brutal. And now to think that you're going to serve this up to a sophisticated hockey fandom and go, no, this is, you're going to like this stuff. You almost wish that it kind of falls on its face.
Yeah, I know, it's funny. And I look back to my 4 years with the Hawks. I don't know if you recall, but 98 to 2002, we didn't have 4,000 people at the United Center. And they said the ratings were at 0, and it was my fault. I mean, their team sucked. They couldn't make the playoffs those years. It was ridiculous. I get the blame for it.
Yeah, how does the announcer get involved by putting the puck in the net?
Unbelievable.
That's exactly right. You hurt their feelings. It's just, those were the days when they would come. Remember, John, they'd come to Franklin Park Ice Arena with a stack of tickets that would choke a horse, and they would beg people to take them. They would run and try to put them in your pocket if you didn't want them.
Yeah, it was a shame. It was a shame.
That's
the way the regime.
One door open for you and one door, the door closed and one door open. Now you have this unbelievable 20-year career with the Wolves. Yeah. And I'll tell you, everywhere where I go, hey, Biily Gardner, analyst, this, that. I mean, it's got to make you feel so accomplished with this one team.
Yeah, well, I've honestly said this, and I did a podcast last week, and I said this, and I mean it 100%. Obviously, I was a player. My wife says, you're putting down your career as a hockey player with the Blackhawks. I said, you know what? I want to be known more as the Chicago Wolves guy. I don't care now about the Blackhawks. What I went through and what our family went through, it was part of my life. There's no doubt about that. I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish and do, but I'm a Wolves guy, and I want people more to recognize that fact. 20 years and some great fun with a team that's, put their best foot forward every year, and the ownership is spectacular. I can't say enough about that, and that's the truth. I'm not trying to blow smoke here either. It's just been that way. It's so neat to be around that atmosphere and not have to worry about, what ownership thinks this way and that way and where you're going and so on and so forth. So, and it's a great, obviously it's a great team, and they've proved over the years how they have done. It's funny, back in my early years, is it Bob Levy? No, that's Steve Levy. Bob, Levy. ESPN. Bob, they did In Between the Lines.
Bob Lee.
Is it on ESPN? So on ESPN, the Hawks and the Wolves played on a Sunday afternoon, and they went to both arenas with cameras. We were out drawing the Hawks that day, and that's what the story was. That here's a minor league team that's out drawing the Chicago Blackhawks, a National Hockey League team. It was pretty unique and pretty cool, and that was a whole half-hour show on a Sunday night on ESPN.
But the difference was with the Wolves always, because of who they are, respected that fact and tried a little harder. There's an arrogance around the Blackhawks that they'd always been there and those types of things. And in doing research to talk to Maltz and to talk to Kinney, you look at, you start looking at the roster, the alumni roster of the Wolves, Jake Allen, Jordan Binnington, Jay Bouwmeester, your buddy Rob Brown, Braden Colburn, Dallas Eakins, Glenn Healy of Hockey Night in Canada, Manny Legacy. It just goes on.
Yeah.
And on, and the 17 Nardellas that were on that.
Yeah.
Those guys.
And they're still coaching.
Right.
Mike would have stated that, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they've had some spectacular hockey minds and players and personalities run through that organization, and still will, without a doubt. Last I don't know, last 10 years maybe, or probably less than that, we've had three most valuable players on our team. I think three of the last maybe 8 years. So it just shows you that they have the knack for bringing in the right chemistry and stuff. And I mean, last year was a funny year with the lockout or the lockout with the pandemic, but we had a very good entertaining team. It's a shame that nobody was able to watch. And the year prior to that, we lost to Carolina in the final, and that now is our mainstay. That is our Charlotte's our team. So it's unique. They do a good job.
How, to that point, broadcasting from the rink in Hoffman Estates, how did you, first of all, it's a rink where you're expecting to see 12-year-olds or peewees playing on a 7 o'clock on a Friday night. And now you're in there and you're right on the game, but there's nobody else there. How did you and Jason work through trying to drive that energy over the course of time?
Honestly, it was very difficult. And, in my eyes as a player, it wasn't a lot of fun. And the team was great and they worked their butt off and really gave it their all. The coaching staff from both Milwaukee and the Wolves combined together were really good. They really helped those kids this year. And the kids needed to play. I mean, they could not miss a full year. It would have been a tragedy. But having said that, the American Hockey League gave out awards. They gave out MVPs and this and that. Some teams played 40 games, some played 20 games. How do you do that? That to me is a farce.
Yeah, they shaved off the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, how do you play 40 games? The West Coast teams did, and there was teams in the East that had 3 teams in their division, so they only played 22, 24 games. And then you have all these awards. First team All-Star. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. They should have just played the games, let the guys play, and go from there. But they played well, and that's what I'm saying. Our team did everything right. I mean, they had a great abundance of talent, and they had really dedicated coaches. But for me to watch that game and try to call it, we were situated around the inside of the one blue line, and we had to look all the way down the ice through the rope, through the mesh. So it was not easy. We had no replays, which is my game. So it was very difficult to call games, and they put it on the air, which was fine, and hopefully people watched. But it wasn't a lot of. I mean, I love the game, and I shouldn't say it wasn't a lot of fun, but it was certainly different. It's nothing I want to go through again.
Before I take it back to Mark, is this the final chapter of Biily Gardner, or could we see Biily Gardner as a coach somewhere down the road?
I'm 61. I think I'm in the category of looking in my rearview mirror. I've been asked that a lot of times, and I just never got into it. I always said you're a coach to get fired. You got hired to be fired, and I just don't know if I probably would have been okay, but I just didn't know if I have that heart to ream guys out and call it as it is as to a player and so on and so forth. But yeah, the game's changed dramatically in that area too. You really work.
The way you break down a game when you're doing the analyzing, when you're doing the book game, I see that about you. So that's why I brought it up. I can see that part of you,
Thank you. That's a big part of being a good analyst, I think. And it's funny, I know everybody that's in my position or play-by-play work, their asses off too. You have to be on top of the game. You have to know the players. You have to know the situations. And that's what makes it fun. It was a lot more difficult this year because we couldn't talk to individuals, morning skates or practices or coaches. We had to Zoom once a week with a coach and a player. You never really got to know these guys. I mean, you didn't even get close to them. So that part was a lot different, more different, and not as fun. And obviously we travel with the team and stuff, so you're around the guys a lot. So you really do get to know them, and that part certainly was missing. And that's the greatest part, being a 61-year-old, being around 20-year-olds. It makes you feel young. I feel like I still could play and stuff, but that certainly isn't the case either.
Yeah, you find that out really fast because our kids are in their late 20s, and every once in a while they're like, "Hey, come on out and take a spin." My kid's got to run some camps, and he goes, "Come on out with the 18-year-olds," and the puck zips around twice, and I'm like, "All right, I'm done. I'll see you in the bar after the skate's over."
I played in Europe for 4 years, and we had a reunion, a 25-year reunion in Graz, Austria, and the team brought all the guys back, and there was 5 Canadians, and they paid our way for a week to play this half-hour game before their team was playing. And I hadn't been on the ice in a number of years, and I still have my '93 tacked skates with the plastic on the side that Chris Chelios loved. But anyway, they were sore putting on, that's for sure. But I'm in the game. I do a first shift. I come off the ice and defenseman looks at me. His name's Rod Doyle. He says, Guardsy, look at your feet. I look down. He goes, I think you have 2 left skates on.
Oh, gee.
That's how I felt. Let me tell you. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. Speaking of that, all right, I had 2 questions here.
Yes.
Your NHL moment and the best chirper, either on your team or who you'd play against in the NHL.
Chirper, wow. Boy. Funny guy. I always talk about Paul Wallace. He was just a blast in Hartford. Chirper, boy. Maybe like a Keith Acton,
Okay.
who I know very well. I played my first year junior in Peterborough. It was his last year. And Keith Acton, myself, and Murray Bannerman made Pat Foley. You know why? Power play. I have the puck, playing the point on the power play. I lose it to my buddy Keith Acton, who skates like the wind, and he's got the breakaway, and Murray makes the stop. And of course, the Bannerman comes out of Foley. So people don't recognize, Pat's had a great career, but I made his career.
Again, another example of Biily Gardner carrying the mail. Carrying the water for those guys.
And what was the other question about the
your NHL moment where you're like,
NHL
somebody
moment,
hit you or the game just went by and you went, holy crap, I'm in the show now.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
That's my first goal in the Calgary Corral.
Wow.
With, I think there were 6,000 seats. And that picture was in the Calgary Sun the next morning. And I just happened to have a sister-in-law at the time who lived in Calgary, and it was a colored picture on the sports page. And we leave right after the game to go to Edmonton on a bus, of course. And she sent me that, and then she sent me the real copy from Calgary. And so, I mean, scoring your first goal is pretty cool. I was on Reggie Lemelin in that rink, shorthanded, as John was saying, a penalty killer, but pretty cool. But first game ever is pretty cool. I played in Winnipeg, which is obviously something you'll never forget. Just the camaraderie with guys. I mean, there's so many little things. Getting your first hockey card as a kid growing up in Toronto, I had hockey cards galore. And, when you finally get one, you're just not going to throw it in your spokes on your bike.
No.
So that was neat.
So what do you do now, or what did you do after retiring? Obviously you did the broadcasting and all, but was there something that you had to do to fill that competitive void, right? You always wanted a scoreboard, or you wanted to do, if you're doing better, was it golf, or what was it for you that kind of filled that in for you as you made the transition?
Well, I played a place called Sanctuary in New Lenox today. And I'm going to tell you the truth. Again, I'm passionate about golf. It is I would rather do golf than anything, whether it's watch, talk about, or play. And I had an eagle and 3 birdies, no bogeys going into 17.
Oh, wow.
And I double bogeyed and bogeyed 18 for 70. So it was going to be my career round. I've had a couple of good rounds this year, but that was going to be, everything was just working perfectly. So that is my passion. You know why? It's yourself. Yes. I love the fact that you can't blame anybody else. Mm-hmm. You can always look at, why did you say something when I was in my swing? You can always say that, but it's yourself. No matter what happens, it's only you. And that's what I love, because it's different than what we were used to as a hockey player or whatever sport you play. It's usually a team game. So that is probably the biggest reason. It's all up here. I mean, it really is. I mean, you got to practice and you got to play well over and over and repetitively, but I love golf. I just watched, I had it on when I came home, watching the women get ready for their Olympic, they're starting up tonight too. So I watch every golf, women, seniors, and regular tour. I tape them, I watch them nonstop.
Oh, I love the Open Championship, getting up at 5:30 and making coffee and watching the guy try to hit out a 6 foot of weeds, going, I could probably do that in about an hour when I go to Redtail in Lakewood. I know that shot. I made that.
It can happen. It can happen. And this year was weird because it was 80 degrees and there was really none of that wispy stuff as much as it was
fast and all of that there too. So,
but I will say this: I between Europe and getting into broadcasting, and it kind of went together my second year, but Reggie Kerr and Peter Marsh. Reggie Kerr, a former player, as is Peter Marsh. Reggie had a business or has a business in home office, partitioning and stuff and that. And he needed some help, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And he called me up and said, you know, I'm really busy. Can you come in and help me? And for 2 years, I did that. And, you know, thank you to Reggie. And Peter was my partner, and we were the laborers, and we built stuff. And it was tough 2 years. You learn a little bit about life.
You learned again, a little bit more about something else. Sure.
Sure.
Hey, John, why don't you give him a wrap up? Because we could keep going, but in fairness to his time.
Billy, I got to be honest with you. Like you said from the beginning, I love the way you opened it tonight, but I got to tell you, back in those days in the early 80s, of course, you know, I thought Chicago hockey made the change when you came here, because those late 70s were starting to get a little old with you know, some of the older veterans. But I will never forget those times, especially that run from 81 to about 88. And I know you were on those teams. It was a great time here in the city. I got to tell you, I remember you as a Blackhawk, but now I remember you totally now as the Chicago Wolf announcer. And for me, you are this Chicago guy. And I have to tell you, Billy, I don't know how to thank you for coming on this Angles and Attitudes with me and Mark. It wasn't, when you answered the call that day to me to come on, I mean, I was just like, wow, you know, I really have enjoyed your career as a player, as an analyst, and please keep doing what you're doing, because let me tell you something, your fan base is huge, and I do owe you a cheese, pepperoni, and sausage pizza.
That was the first thing I said
in the email, but we love you, Billy. I mean, this was fantastic tonight.
Well, it's funny. I quickly too. You know, I born and bred in Toronto and grew up a Canadian, but this is my 40th year living really in Elmhurst, in Illinois, and it's kind of funny now to think back where all that time is gone. And even though I got traded and so on, I always came back in the summer, so it's always been my home here for 40 years. So, you know, that.
Well, I got to tell you, Mark and I are going to meet you for dinner at the best restaurant is in Elmhurst, and it's my friends of the family, Pazzi di Pizza.
Okay.
Which is right on York Road, the best Italian food in town.
Yeah.
We got to bring in Mr. Gardner.
I love it for sure. Absolutely. Without a doubt.
This guy. All right. Hey, thanks again, Billy. Hit him straight. Enjoy the rest of the summer, and we'll see you either for dinner or we'll be knocking on the booth at Allstate.
Sounds great. Thank you guys so much.
All right.